to Robby, and we're going to be doing solving some puzzles today. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'm doing 2 today because I did so poorly yesterday. I just was so disappointed, so I'm going to be doing a second video. I actually recorded it last night but posted it this morning, so hopefully I can do a little bit better. Thanks for all the subscribers, and we're going to get started. So, all right, so what's the first thing we do? We assess the position, correct? And so what does the position tell us? White is down the exchange, and his king is very weak. What else do we notice? We notice the black king is also potentially weak because of some ideas with queen g5. We notice that we got to be a little careful for any kind of rook, any kind of moves on the third rank with the rook, or maybe a queen here or a queen here. So if my queen leaves this third rank, I have to watch all of those. If the knight leaves the e4 square, I have to worry about things going to the c3 square. So these are the kind of little practical tricks you gotta look at. And so let's see if we can find something. In this position, the other thing I want you to look at is how many checks are there for black here that just don't hang something right away. The only one I see is queen f1 check, king h4, and do we see any more checks after that? And I still don't see any. So it does mean that we have a little bit more flexibility than usual to go after something. So we could maybe take a look at a move like f takes g. My instincts tell me that's wrong, but my instincts have been wrong on some other puzzles too. So do we see any defensive ideas for black that we might have to be worried about? This is interesting. Queen f1 check, king h4, and queen f4. That would probably diffuse any kind of attack that black could do. So I'm going to guess that the first move has to be queen g5 because it does threaten checkmate. But do we see? So what would happen if we played queen g5? They're forced to play either queen f1 and then g6, or queen g after, or just simply g6 right away. So let's see here. If queen g5, g6, queen h6, queen f1 check, king h4, are there any checks there? He's got queen e1 check, but then we have knight e3. I don't see him getting out of that. Okay. So let's check that again. It looks too good to be true. And at this higher level kind of puzzles, you got to think that there's something that we're missing. So, all right. So if queen g5, let's get rid of these arrows. So queen to g5. All right. We got to look at g6. Oh, the other check we got to look at is queen d3 check. Now, if knight g3 in that position, then he'd have queen g6, and that would stop things. So if queen g5, queen d3 check, we'd have to play king h4. And I don't see any more checks there either. And so there's no good defense. So, okay. So after queen g5, do we see anything he can try? Queen f1, king h4, and then g6. All right. And then if queen h6, we have a slightly different position. He has queen e1 check, but we still have knight g3. So that looks right to me. All right. And then let's just check this one more time. So if queen here, if queen check here or here, we've got knight g3. If queen f1 check, we have king h4. Can't check on f2. So we have to check back on e1, and we have knight g3. So that looks like a winner to me. All right. And so let's just check this one more time to make sure. Knight g3 looks like the most obvious, but except, sorry about that. Technical difficulties. Okay, so if knight g3, we have queen takes f6, so we're gonna have to play king h4. g5, okay, and then if we take with the knight, I think that's gonna lead to well, actually, maybe it doesn't lead to trouble. If knight takes g5, queen f2 check, unfortunately. Yeah, that would be a disaster. So we're going to have to take with the queen. And we got it right. All right, cool. So, yay, we're on a winning streak. That's one. All right. So, actually, one thing I wanted to kind of point out to you as a general rule is that a knight is an amazing defender. It hits so many squares, and when it blocks checks, it guards so many squares. And it's just a wonderful defender. It can hit so many squares that that other pieces cannot. So, a knight is a wonderful defender if you're trying to debate whether to have a knight or maybe a bishop or something like that. Because the knight can hit all the squares, of course, and the bishop can only hit half of them. So, all right, next one. What are we doing? We are assessing. I'm going to keep saying that for the entire time I do these videos. So we have 1, 2, 3 pawns for white. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for black. Looks like this came out of a dragon. So black is up 2 pawns. We each have a minor piece. We each have a rook. We each have a queen. It looks like white's king is a little weak, but really I don't see any real checks that he has to worry about. Obviously, the most obvious thing in the position is that we can take this for free. So the key is not to find maybe the first move, but the key is to finding what's the second move. So are we 100% sold that we're going to do it that way? Other candidate moves, I don't see anything else. Knight h5 would just simply allow queen to f8, so I don't see that leading to anything. Real quick, just so if the queen was here, of course, we would have mate. But if the knight gets in the way, we do still have this queen f8 move, because if we sack the knight here, going for mate, he has the defense of taking with the queen. And if we take here, and there's no more checks that without trading queens. So the move clearly has to be queen takes h7. So we got to keep analyzing there. Famous last words. That's why my ratings dropped a little bit, because I get too confident. But I think I do see the answer here. So queen takes out h7. That forces king h8. Now, do we have any checks here that are going to work? If we go back to h6, the king is going to run, and black is going to survive. If he checks on h8, we have bishop g8. Okay? And again, you could stop your analysis there, but why? But you shouldn't, because white has this annoying rook h7 move, which threatens queen here. But I think black has rook g5 there, and I think he's going to survive that one, because the queen is actually trapped on h8. So I think what you need to do here, and the trick, is to notice that you don't always have to go for check, and sometimes it's good to take away his squares that he can go to. So I think the answer is takes, king h8, and then simply the quiet move, queen g6, which threatens rook h8. If the bishop goes to g8 in advance, we still have rook here. And notice that rook g5 doesn't hold, because we can simply take with the rook. Okay, so I think I'm pretty confident saying that. Of course, I'll probably be wrong, but let's check it out. So it takes, queen g6. Aha, all right, the spite check, and then they just resign. So just to finalize that, or just so you can see it, take here, 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 and that is game over. Notice that in the previous line, if I had played this is what I was referring to earlier, and then here, that's a threat. Rook g7 is a threat, but unfortunately for us, rook g5 is a stopper. And you never want to get your queen trapped like this, because then you literally have to back the rook up in order to create any threats. But by then, you've already kind of lost the whole thread of the game. So anyway, okay, so we got 2 in a row. Let's go to the next one. All right, so we're going to do, what are we going to do again? We're going to assess the position. How did you know? So, black has 6 pawns, white has 3. Unfortunately, in this position, black is down an entire rook. So, but let's look at some other factors in the position. What makes this ripe for a potential trick of some sort? Well, first of all, we have a knight that's not well placed. We have a rook that is very, very misplaced. We got a pass pawn on the 6th rank, although albeit it is blockaded. But you can definitely smell tricks all over the place. The question is which one. I've got some ideas, but let's go ahead and throw out the candidate moves. First of all, the other thing you need to notice in the position is that this is hanging. Okay, so we got to do something about that. The first thing that came to my mind when I saw this position was bishop h6, bishop e5, and queen to d6. All of those moves came to mind as I was looking at this position. And let's see, what else? Do I see anything else that might be juicy? Rook f1 looks somewhat interesting. One of the reasons I really don't want to move the queen, or my instincts are telling me not to move the queen, is because I like guarding that diagonal. I like the fact that he's limited to these 2 squares, and I like the fact that if he had to go to h2, that I have bishop e5. I have bishop e5 ideas because it's on the same color as my bishop. So that's what I'm kind of looking at here. So let's take a look. Okay. My instincts are telling me bishop e5 has to be the move because I want to bring a new piece into the game. It is defended, but he can't. If he takes, I have queen takes, and that threatens rook takes g4, which could be juicy. So after bishop e5, I am threatening rook takes, or I'm threatening, well, what am I threatening? I'm threatening potentially rook to g1 with a discovery. Rook takes g4, king h3, and then and queen h1 is also quite lovely. If bishop e5, if he tries to play knight f3, that fails because of a double check. Or does it? Does the king go to h3 anyway? Okay, let's do a little calculating. Too much speculation here. So, as I tell one of my students, a broken clock is right twice a day when they instantly throw out answers. I will leave that name unsaid to protect the guilty. Okay, so if bishop e5, knight f3, we just take with the rook. So that's nothing. I don't know what I was thinking. So bishop e5, king h3, we've got some queen h1 ideas as well. And then I think what really helps in this position is this pawn. So if there's ever, if that queen ever moves, the d2 is definitely something to consider. So we got to keep that in mind too. So I think we're going to go with bishop e5. I think it's the best move, and I think you got to do it. Okay, we were right. And now in this position, one thing that we did not state, but is pretty obvious, is that now if I take this and they take here, I can simply trade. And remember what that thing I just talked to you about with the d2? Now it comes into play because he cannot stop the pawn from queening because that stupid knight on g1. So remember, part of our original assessment is that you notice weird placements of pieces, and that knight on g1 is just misplaced. So we're going to go ahead and do this, take, and d2. And oh my gosh, we got 3 in a row. I think I'd get more points if I actually solved it more quickly, but that's not really the purpose of this little series that we're doing. So, all right, we're going to go to the next one. All right, so here we have a position where this is a complete mess, but it looks really good for white. You just got to figure out how to kill him. Um, Black is up a piece for a pawn. He's threatening a queen, a second queen. So it's either mate or bust. There are no other options. No other. I don't see anything else that could even possibly be there. Um, so we got to figure out. But the good thing is that we have a rook on A8 that is not really doing much, and the queen, for all intents and purposes, is out of play. The only thing we do got to worry about is that there's one check in the position, and that's taking this pawn. Queen c2 is not a check because we have the rook on here. So that gives us some comfort that there's that that we only have to worry about one thing, which is nice. Of course, I mean I haven't seen this puzzle before, but I'm going to guess that every move is going to be check. That's just the type of position it feels like to me. The candidate moves are there's a few actually that look pretty good here. So what we're going to have to analyze, we're going to have to analyze rook c6. It's the only non-queen move I see. And then we got queen e4, and we got queen e6. We got to calculate all those. So we'll do the easy parts first. Queen e6, if king here, then just queen here is mate. So there's nothing to look at there. So what we have to calculate then is if queen e6, if he takes the pawn, do we have anything? Notice we can't play queen g4 because this queen is there. I think that would probably lead to a win otherwise. So after queen e6, king g5. Okay, so what other checks are there in that position? Rook g7 doesn't work because there's a bishop on it. So the only other move we have is h4. And those are always sneaky little moves that you sometimes forget. So if king takes, so if queen e6, king g5, h4 takes. If rook h7, king back to g5, do we have anything there? Queen e3. That's an interesting idea. We're gonna have to give that some more thought. So if rook h7. What bugs me is that white has queen e4 check also, which looks like it leads to very, very similar type of ideas. Okay, so let's make sure we get this right. We're going to go for 3 in a row. We're going to go for the trifecta. So queen e6, king g5, h4 takes, rook h7, king g5, queen e3. If king g6, we have queen h6, the king runs. Not so confident of that one. All right. I hate giving up on this because it does seem right, but let's take a look and see if we have another idea that might be more successful and a little quicker, because that looks very complicated. We could look at rook c6. Again, if king here, we have rook h6 mate again. Okay, so if we checked on c6 and the king went to h7, does rook h6 win? King g7, queen e7, king. Wait a second. If rook c6, king h7, king h7, we have rook h6. King g7, queen h7, king f8. We're still not out of the woods though, are we? Because this stupid bishop is in the way. It's very annoying. Okay, so for rook h6, do we have anything better? For king h7, oh, of course, we can check on e4, which gets him off of that square. I just don't want the bishop to interpose at any point. So that's why I was giving him the tickle with rook h6, but to make him go to another square that would be more exposed. Huh, it's interesting. Okay. All right, so I keep clicking on that thing for no reason. All right, so what happens if rook c6, king h7, queen e4, I think that is gonna be good, although, oh yes, that's a hidden idea in the position, or not hidden, but it's a new opportunity, is after queen e4, if the king ever goes to h8, we do have queen h4 as another option, as another check, because the bishop controls all the squares on the diagonal. So, all right. What about queen e4 checked? Is that any clearer? King takes g5. Queen g4 check. King h. That does not look right. So I'm torn actually. I'm torn between playing rook c6 and queen e6. Queen e6 looks like the right move, but in analysis we did not figure out that being a win. All right, we're going to go with rook c6. I think that's right. And I was wrong. Oh, no. All right, so let's try it again. All right, so we're going to go with queen e6. Oh, I was wrong on both. So, yeah, so both of my candidate moves are wrong. So the only other move that can be here is queen e4. And oh, shoot. All right, king h5. I guess, George. Oh, it's very simple. Yeah, that was really silly on my part, yes, to see this. Because now, if they take here, oh my goodness. All right, and then if h4 check, all right, the king has to retreat. And then we've got queen e6. That was actually really simple. I made that way too hard. And of course, it was the move we spent the least amount of time looking at. So that was very bad on my part to miss that. So anyway, okay, let's try the next one. All right, so now it looks like we have some sort of a King's Indian or a Benko of sorts. Here, white is up 3 pawns. Each side has 2 minor pieces and a rook. White's king is more open than black's, although he is able to maybe escape. So that's one of the first things I notice in the position. What else do we notice? We got to look at other type of moves that you normally wouldn't look at. Rook f8, king g1, bishop d4 check is not possible because the queen's on it. So I don't really see that leading to anything. So these are like the puzzles where you kind of have to think outside the box a little bit. And one thing I do see, it looks right actually, is maybe to take this guy. You violate his general principles, but what you do is he has to take back with a bishop because of this guy's pinned. And then we got to look at queen takes e4, which you think, well, big deal. Well, it does threaten to take the rook, and also rook f8 is also something to consider. So let's actually see if that's actually correct. All right, so anything else we have here? Rook f8. Is rook f8 and then taking c3 any better? Always leads me to believe that when there's 2 ways to get to a position, you think there's something that's not quite right. Well, again, this is what happens when you assume. Knight takes e4 looks very juicy, because after knight takes, queen takes, not only are we hitting the rook, but now we have the bishop d4 as a possible idea. So, little exercise, puzzle rush type of position. I'll leave it for you guys to figure out. So, real quick, the thing I want you guys to calculate is if knight takes e4, knight takes e4, queen takes e4, what's wrong with rook e1? Okay, so pause the video. Okay, and what's wrong with it is that after rook f8 check, king g1, bishop d4 check, king to h1, we simply take here with the queen, we take his rook, and we got a back ranker. Okay, I'll show that when we actually solve the puzzle. Whenever you see something like that, you know you've got a potential winner. But we gotta also look at some other possibilities. So if knight takes e, because we can't assume that that's going to be good. So if knight takes e4, if he plays like queen d5 instead, trying to trade off the queens, the queen being off of this square means that when we check on f8, it is possible that on king, well, it's not possible, it would work. If king g1, then we have queen b6 check, and we set up a smothered mate, which we'll cover in a second. So I'm confident enough in this, although I probably shouldn't be. After knight takes e4, is there anything else we can try? Queen d5, if check, is there anything else? King e2. I think the problem is that we take here, and we've got this guy. So I definitely feel comfortable enough in this position saying this is winning. So let's go ahead and take it. Oh, and I'm wrong. All right, so that was not good, and I was so sure of it too. I was so sure of it. So you know what? Is it this? Please say it's not this. It's not. All right, so yeah, so unusual. My instincts generally are pretty good, but here I did not suggest the move. It was not one of my candidate moves at all of what to play here. So let's see what happens here. The move is, aha, it's a rook move. So we're supposed to check here first. And now we're supposed to take on e4? Oh my goodness, that's the reason. Yes, all right. So, as I famously have told my students all the time, move order matters. So we had the right idea. What we did was, unfortunately, I took first. But actually, there's no reason for that. Let's throw the check in first. If the king goes here, then I think we still have this knight takes e4 idea. And now there's no queen d5 because we can now take on c3 with check and then grab this guy on d5. Yeah, interesting, interesting. All right, so let's take a look and see if this is actually right. So let's analyze this. So if rook f8, if king e2, then I think knight takes e4 is going to be juicy. I think actually the more human move, of course, is king e1. But I think we can just simply check on d3, I want to say. If king here, we've got this at a minimum. Okay, queen here is interesting also because now the king is coming out. But I don't see a crusher here. Is there something else we missed? Maybe it's just queen here. Yeah, and then threading rook f2. Interesting. So anyway, okay, so the move order mattered. So it was more important. So let's just make sure we understand that. So what I had suggested earlier, which was knight takes, sorry. Yeah, I was suggesting takes, queen takes, and if rook here, I was not smart here because I said this move. But of course he can simply, now that we see it, he can simply sack his queen for the rook and take this. So yeah, that's a my bad. So I should have played the move that was more forcing and make him make a decision, knowing that I wasn't losing anything by throwing that check in. So this happens in chess all the time, where you have to compare the positions and say what was different about this position than the other position. All right, so we're going to do one more. Okay, my rating is under 2,900. All right, so this looks like a study of sorts. White has two pieces for the queen. Black's queen is actually trapped right now. In some ways, can't really move to too many squares. I guess G6 is it. Yeah, this is really cool. So what's interesting about this is that let's just take a quick look. And whenever you're solving a study, always make it the other guy's turn. All right. So let's take some of that. So black has three pieces that can legally move: the queen, the king, and this pawn. Okay. So if the king went to G7, if king G7, we have knight G4 winning the queen. If king E7, we have knight G8 winning the queen. Okay, so no king move in this position is good. What queen moves for black does he have? Well, if he takes on F4 in this position, we have bishop A3 check, king G7, and knight H5. So the queen really is relegated to playing queen G6. So what does that tell us? What does prophylactic chess tell us? It tells us take away your opponent's options. So I think F5 is good here. Yeah. And so he has to leave his queen where it is. And so now this is it. I wonder if, so I don't have passing moves with my bishop because it has queen C1 check. So this bishop has to stay put. So the question is, can I actually take this pawn on E2? So again, if I take the pawn on E2 and any king move is played, I'm just going to be able to win his queen, as we learned earlier. And if the queen moves to any square like F4, queen moving to F4 is just like him taking on F4. It's the same thing. So we're going to take this guy, and then we're going to give him a check here, and we're going to do a fork, and we're going to take this guy. All right, so we got 3 points. It took us 2 minutes and 38 seconds. I'm still not over 2,900, so we definitely can't end on that one, so we got to keep going. All right, so here we have a position in which 3 pawns each, bishop each, rook each, queen each. Part of the assessment of the position is black's king is weaker than white's. White has a nice little pawn thing in front of his king. Good defense. Black's bishop on c8 is always sticks out like a sore thumb to me, just because it's on the back row, and it just seems by its lonesome. So do we have anything here that could potentially work? Oh, of course, the other thing is that black presumably played rook here, and so the rook is threatening to trade off the rooks. If the rooks come off, barring some trick on the back row or taking advantage of the bishop being on c8, I don't that white's not going to have enough to win, even though his king is a little safer. So what are the candidate moves here? Candidate moves, you got to look at the forcing moves first, which is rook takes rook, queen takes, and then something like queen c6. because the bishop has nowhere to go because we control this. That actually looks really good. It can't be that easy. It never is. So queen c. If we take queen c6. How does he move his bishop? Any bishop move hangs it. There's no checks. I'm just going to do it. Oh, and I only got 1 point. 1 point. So chess.com obviously knows that I'm not quitting until I get to 2,900. So we're doing another one. That was actually a pretty easy one, although there were a lot of candidate moves we could have considered there. But again, always look for the simple one. All right, here we have a rook endgame. Okay. So I think this is, yeah, so this is interesting. This is a combination of knowing that black. So when it's a rook and pawn versus rook, if you're on the defending side, one of the techniques is to play the Philidor position and put your rook on the third rank and guard that. And so, but one of the wrinkles that you can throw in is that if you can give black a pawn that blocks that, it's not going to be successful. In other words, the pawn is a hindrance to black's defense. So I already know that it's going to be involving check and then throwing away one of the pawns. The question is which one? Well, the rook pawn and king versus rook and rook pawn versus rook is generally a draw. So it would be better for us to keep the c pawn. So I think the answer is going to be rook to g7 check, king moves, and then a6. And then if he takes it, we're actually going to advance the king to b6 and leave him with that pawn there. So let's check it out. All right. Now, real quick, you should note, well, why not king here? Well, he just simply checks, and then that definitely is a draw. So if c6 takes, even if king b6, if we try to leave him with the pawn, the problem is that he can play c5, and then he can check on the third rank anyway. So this has to be a6. Okay, so my opponent didn't even bother. There must be a trick. So I'm pretty sure that rook takes is a win, but AB, oh, I see. Yeah, so what, little common trick. If I play AB, it looks like just c6 is winning, but he's got a very annoying rook to b6, which sacks the rook and forces a stalemate. So we have to take this. And we got the answer, and of course I got 2 points. It's worth taking a look at that one, though. So let's take a look at this again. So rook here, king b8, a6. If they take here, I think the reason they didn't show the answer of take is because it takes much longer. Takes, okay, king b6. And now, if the rook leaves the first rank, we have a mate. Okay, and if black tries to start running this pawn, we move our pawn here. And if he keeps running, because the rook is still stuck here, so he doesn't really have a choice, then you have this technique that you all need to know. Rook b7 check. If king here, we check, here, check, and then pick up the rook. Okay, and then of course, if he'd gone king c8, so it's not all check, it doesn't matter. Rook a7, we're threatening checkmate with rook a8, and so king here is forced, and then we just transpose with c7 check here and here. And we win that baby. Okay? All right, cool. So we got some rook ending technique positions. I always like it when those come up because I'm familiar with those concepts. So some good actual mates here. All right, we're going to keep going because I just can't take it anymore. These losing 14 points when you get something wrong, and you get 2 or 1 if you get it right. All right. Oh, I bet this came from a Benko. I can already tell, or of a collie or of some sort. So what are we analyzing here? We got 4 minor pieces each. Equal pawns. White's knight on h3 looks really awkward. The only other thing I see that you got to see is these bishops are attacking each other, but doesn't seem to really win anything. Frankly, this position doesn't smell like there's a crusher here, but of course there must be, because that's why there's a puzzle. So, what are our candidate moves? We could take to avoid any kind of disruption of the attack. Oh, is that a devilish tactic? Wow. Yeah, so you don't see this very often. See if you can find what I'm looking at here. I mean, I don't know that it's right, but it feels right. I think it is right. We're going to take on g2. If king takes, we have rook takes f2 check. And if knight takes f2, we have knight e3 check, picking this guy up. Okay? And I see that if white throws in taking the bishop on g7, in that variation we have queen g7. So if we go through the same line at the very end, so if bishop takes g7, or I'm sorry, if bishop takes g2, bishop takes g7, we didn't even analyze taking the rook, but let's just say we don't take the rook. Queen takes, king takes, rook f2, knight f2, knight e3, check, king moves. We're going to take here, bishop takes, and then we have queen here, which forks these two guys here. So I think this just wins on the spot. Yep. And we got it, and we got 5 points, and we were over 2,900. Excellent. Back to where I should have been to begin with, although I was much higher yesterday. So let's just take a look at that position and see. It did kind of stop the analysis, but bishop takes g2, okay? Bishop g7, queen takes, although I maybe could have taken the rook. That probably would have been good too. King takes, rook f2, not rook takes f2, because this rook would be hanging in that variation. So taking with the knight is most prudent. Knight takes here, and then takes. And if takes, we got this. Okay, that just cinches it. Not that if we didn't get this, we wouldn't be good, because we have a lot of pawns, and black doesn't really have any holes or any kind of weaknesses like that. Out of curiosity, we can try taking here. Do a little bit of analysis here. Does that work? Takes, 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 takes. There went the fun. That's not very much fun. Anything else we can try here? Oops. So if we take here first, is there anything else we can try? Bishop takes. Bishop takes. So we're down the exchange here, but is there some trick that I should be aware of? I guess we can take here and there's enough compensation. Yeah. I mean, queen g5 looks good. Queen h4. This is hanging. Yeah, this is good too. So I think both variations are good. If he had tried to take on g7 first, but again, you can't assume that all of that works. You just can't. You have to keep going, and just because it looks cool, there's a lot of stuff that looks cool in chess that does not work. So anyway, thanks everybody for watching. I still made some mistakes today. One was not something that I should allow, but we did get some other ones correct. So thanks for everyone for tuning in, and please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Tell your friends. It doesn't cost you anything to subscribe, and that's all for now. Thanks, guys.